Hey, yo, hello, hello, and welcome to the Daily News for Toronto for Wednesday, January the 30th. I'm going to start out with the housing now situation. They discussed it in the City Council meeting on the 31st. So Wednesday and Thursday is City Council meetings about the housing now thing, transforming 11 sites into mixed condo, apartment, and super cheap housing. So during the session, actually, right at the end of Mayor Tory's big speech about how they need to they can't make the situation too good for super poor people, because then nothing will get built, because the developers that they need won't have enough profit margin to put anything in at all, and then they won't get any bids. So the whole thing is they're putting these sites up for bid, and there's all these things that are like nice to haves that probably should be requirements about the different bids. So all these counselors, you got various counselors saying like, okay, why are we considering, why are we giving more consideration to, why are we considering, retaining parking, but not at the loss of more housing to be a nice to have? Why are we considering that? But also, why are we considering the amount of why aren't we requiring certain things rather than considering them to be bonuses in terms of reviewing the different bids? And what they're talking about is stuff that would make places more available to super poor people. So the thing is, the way that it's set up now, the predicament is, if there's just no bidders that are offering the goal of lots of long-term super affordable housing, then there's a whole bunch of ways that it can be compromised when they try and choose one that, for each of the sites. And so the staff keeps, the councillors are poking holes in it as this sort of way of just like selling a bunch of this land. What we've done in the past is we've just let developers just remove affordable rental housing, which is most in demand, and then replace it with condos, which is not as in demand. It's more profitable, but there's not as much need for it. And so now, instead of, the gist of this whole thing is, instead of trying to compensate for that mistake by putting in a whole bunch of deeply affordable stuff, which would require a lot of investment by the city or somebody, they are trying to pioneer a new strategy moving forward. So they're not trying to evaluate this in a way that's going to create like a city that overall has what we need. They're trying to say, like, how can we get some affordable housing out? How can we do with some parcels of land what we should have been doing with this massive amount of real estate that has already been developed and is never ever going to be available as affordable housing, now that there's a huge shortage of available land. So it's basically now that we've spent our whole budget on reconstructing the Gardner, and this is the problem with like conservative municipal governments, is they'll break the bank on big, like, unpopular projects that are profitable for their developer friends, and then they'll be like, oh well, we need developers to also pay for the stuff that we should be paying for, as in like housing, social stuff, infrastructure, and everything. So it's along those lines. And city staff ended up admitting some pretty like shocking stuff. They admit that up to 1/3 of the land could be sold as condos. So the condo, it's 1/3 condos, 1/3 apartments, 1/3 super cheap housing. The 1/3 that's for condos and the 1/3 that's for apartments could actually be sold off the city. And it's like retaining that as a lease instead of a sale is a bonus instead of a requirement. So we're not requiring that 100% of the land remain city property that we're leasing long term, that we've got 99-year leases for developers with. We're saying that would be nice, but if we don't get anything like that, and you submit a bid where you want to take away 2/3 of that spot and buy it just as private, and we'll retain somehow ownership of 1/3 of it. So they admitted that, and they also admitted that this is not intended to supply deeply affordable housing at the outset. That's a direct quote from city staff. So I mentioned that somebody was heckling Mayor Tory at the end of his speech. So Mayor Tory's speech and city staff, whoever their representative was, they kept answering like, well, we have to make this appealing to developers. And then the critics were kind of saying, well, we have to make this, accessible for the social enterprise agencies that would actually give us the affordable housing that we need. And so they're sort of battling it back and forth. But Tory is like, along with staff is like on the, we need to maintain, keep it attractive. We can't make it, we can't make it too good for poor people, because then it won't be attractive for the rich developers. It's not much of a extrapolation of what he said. That's really basically just a super brief version of his point and staff's point as well. And somebody heckled him, and the only thing I could make out of it was something about sustainable living will be your legacy, like either the elimination of sustainable living or land management and usage sustainable living will be your, like, land management in relation to sustainable living will be your legacy, Mr. Tory. Something about maybe depopulation of people. I don't know if I heard that right afterwards. So this is from this heckler, so somebody actually staged this in city council, just started yelling. Not sure who it was. The other thing about the Housing Now thing is that the councillor there's a whole bunch of, there's a few parking lots in the city that have been like this sort of battleground for a couple of the councillors. I think Councillor Pasternak has been like really intent on this, but I'm not sure whether it's him. So they're erring on the side basically of retaining housing at the expense of parking, commuter parking, rather than retaining parking at the expense of more housing units. So they're actually removing, some of these sites are like currently parking lots on top of TTC spots, and the staff rationalization for removing it for the replacement, the choice is, what we need here is dense housing. What we have here is a TTC, transit hub, and the parking is, we're trying to reduce the amount of commuter parking in order to basically strangle driving a little bit in the city. So they state it's weird. So they're sort of regressive on this one front in terms of providing affordability, just because this whole plan is just depending on not having any budget and just being a P2P thing, because they want to spend the money on the gardener instead of housing. But then in terms of transportation progressiveness, they're erring on the side of they're going to be on the right side of history here with trying to replace some, like actually reducing the parking to reduce the induced demand that it creates on driving and stuff. So that was an interesting aspect of it. But there's going to be a big fight over some of these sites, because these parking lots have been fought over a whole bunch already. So there's this Fab Lab, Computer Lab, and Maker Hub that there's two stories I want to talk about from APTN. First of all, they talk about Fab Lab, and it's this. It's like we have these Maker Hubs with a 3D printer and CAD software and stuff, but they're going to all this different sort of indigenous type crafts level stuff with it. Check out Fab Lab. It seems really super cool. APTN, the other story I want to talk about is they dropped their second of third episodes about child foster child services, and they're kind of exposing some issues with it sort of being industrialized and people being exploited. Yeah, so the situation at Wet'suwet'en is they gave them an inch. You know, the old saying, you give someone an inch, they'll take a mile or whatever. So the thing that the Coastal GasLink people are in trouble for is ripping out trap lines and stuff. So they said, okay, you can come in and do some little bit of survey work, and they brought bulldozers in. So it goes to show this is exactly just a continuation of the same kind of politics we've seen between indigenous people and settler industry. It's just as it always has been. So the FBI found this tunnel in the States leading to this bank. The problem was, like, the guy tunneled into this bank in Florida, which has, like, the soil is really, it's kind of, it's like they thought it was a sinkhole, but the whole place is a sinkhole. So you tunnel through it and it just kind of caves in. So the guy tunneled in and tried to tunnel through, gave up, I guess, abandoned the tunnel, and the FBI found it. So 50,000 pounds of chicken nuggets have been contaminated with rubber in the States. This company had to do a follow up on a whole bunch of people finding rubber in their chicken nuggets they bought at the grocery store, and the last time it was wood in the nuggets. The U.S. Intel agency had like 7 intelligence agencies in the States. Their heads have finally called out Trump on being just wrong about all his like bullshit assertions about like everything, because I guess they can't handle it anymore. And he freaked out, saying they should go back to school. So there's a seniors home that actually lets its people get injured or risk getting injured and like walk around on their own to like retain their, like quality of life over, absolutely physically protecting people. So we're doing this with kids and seniors now, turning the page on, how much we're willing to protect people versus how much we're willing to let them have their freedom. A whole bunch of Canadian film like gurus, big time Canadian film people had this sort of conference about this Netflix CanCon issue, like about how Netflix is basically like everybody who profits off of making film and stuff in Canada has to like pay into this fund that goes towards sponsor funding Canadian content. So it's like an arts fund. But Netflix, because they're an online provider, they don't have to. And they keep saying, well, you shouldn't require online providers to do the same thing. So they're like, because we use the internet to publish our stuff instead of your shitty networks, your shitty cable networks, because we use the internet, we should be exempt from this. And the other internet people should be exempt too. In Surrey, a transit operator almost got killed when this guy shot him. So Ottawa is the federal government is flipping out about social media. They're going to try to get social media outlets to somehow police fake news. And it's like, nobody likes being a mod. Nobody likes being an admin. And so they're like, India is also on this tip. They're actually drafting this thing that would police online speech to the point where it would break WhatsApp's encryption, which is why everybody uses it. The CBC admitted that the cold is actually because of climate change, and so did MSNBC. So the weather, the networks have finally, so the east-west weather anyway is about to switch. In Toronto, it's been like really super cold, and the West Coast, it's been all balmy. It's about to switch. The premier in Ontario here he did this first press conference of the year, and it's just he's insane. So this new restaurant called Club Fed is going to actually sponsor. They're gonna give funding to Sketch and other like Toronto community help agencies for poor people, and they are employing ex-cons. Somebody got stopped on the QEW. This guy was wearing a ski mask and had the word "kill" written on his car somehow, and was driving on the QEW. That's whack. So on 260 Wellesley, they got their usual rent increase of it's going to be like $20-$30 a month more. They got no real like compensation for, you know, the flooding and the negligence and whatever. But they will have to pay. You know, they aren't getting a $200 a month rent increase, just $20 to $30 a month. But they're still just kind of like, you know, they're still not into it, of course. Okay, have a great one. Keep your stick off the ice.